Well, this could be fun. Here we are in Shanks's kitchen in Bakewell, and it could be fun, or there could be blood on the counter. I'm going to introduce this fabulous English-made sparkling wine. Let's call it English champagne, shall we? It's the brand Kamzada, and I've met my maker, or I've met this champagne maker, and this is the first tasting. Let's see if we can pop the cork. As you know, the secret to opening a champagne bottle, you don't need me to tell you this, is you twist the bottle, not the cork. That seems to have worked okay. Now, I'm going to pour myself a little glass of this English bubbly, and you'll notice I'm pouring a second one, and that's for the unseen guest. I happen to know somebody who is having a bit of a rough day today. Oh, don't overflow there, Phil. And so, in sympathy, I'm going to do the decent thing, and I'm going to pour her a glass of bubbly as well, and open an oyster, and drink and eat them both out of sympathy. Let's have a cheers first of all. It's the season of goodwill towards all men, so cheers. And honestly, I know my champagnes, and that is spot on. That hits the mark, and I would say it's dry, but it's actually a very tasty. By that I mean it's a very fruitful tasting English sparkling champagne. I'm loving it. Thanks, Cam. Now this is the bloody bit. Has any one of you opened an oyster before? These are fresh from the fishmongers next door, JH Man. There's another plug for another brand. JH Man, the fishmongers, all your fresh fish needs. And Christian, I asked him to open 2 oysters for me, and being the businessman that he is, instead he sold me an oyster knife, which I don't even know if I've got it the right way round. I don't mean like, oops, I don't mean the right way round as in I'm not supposed to hold the sharp end. I mean that way round. I think it fits snugly in the palm of your hand. You wrap up I'm rather sad because he's told me that right now the oyster, which has been on ice until now, is living, and inserting this is going to kill the poor thing, and then I'm going to eat it fresh. So let's see how we get on. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not going to try and pretend to annotate this, otherwise I might do myself a bit of a damage, but here we go. Insert at the lip, and don't take it out, he says. Don't take it out. And then slide that round there to dislodge it. And first time lucky, hopefully with a bit of luck, we've got, oof, look at that, absolutely gorgeous, fresh. I don't know where they're from, these oysters, whether they're from, I'm sure they're locally sourced. He's been a fishmonger in Sheffield for years. He's also got a restaurant in Kelham Island, Sheffield, called Native, which I must try. Of course, specialising in fish. Down the hatch. Chew or swallow? I don't know what the correct technique is. For me, No lemon juice, why spoil a pure taste? No chilli, no onion, just raw, fresh, living, dare I say, oyster. And that is gorgeous. And I just need a little dip of this. So to anyone who is a little bit below par today, it might not be anything particularly difficult, troublesome, or anything to do with the pandemic. We've had new regulations introduced overnight, which is a bit disconcerting, isn't it? But that's all. This is a bit extreme, but there's always something to take your mind off it. What's that saying? Everything happens for a reason. That sounds a bit wishy-washy, a little bit faux, a little bit fairy, a little bit new agey, doesn't it? A bit weak, a bit limp. Everything happens for a reason. It's tantamount to nothing but fatalism. Well, that's not very spiritual, is it? That what que sera, sera, what will be, will be. But there are two lenses through which you can view this. Everything happens for a reason, or what will be, or it is what it is. All of these, I have to say, glib sayings, but what's behind them? And there are two lenses through which you can view life as it happens on the travelator in front of you. You can either be paranoid, where you're convinced that everything that happens to you is out to get you. Like I could, for example, have imagined I was going, as I did imagine, to be fair, that I skewered my hand with the oyster knife. I managed to get away with that. Or, you know, everybody's against you, or, you know, the unexpected bill is, you take it personally. From the sublime to the mundane, everything seems to be ganging up on you. Or, as I prefer, I suppose it's a choice really, take your choice. I prefer to be pronoic, which is everything seems to be working in my favour, if that's the right way to put it. It sounds a bit hedonistic in a way, but it's not. If I if I try and self-justify that very hedonistic attitude as I enjoy this second oyster whilst it's still fresh, this sort of, let's call it Epicurean, shall we? Not hedonistic. That sounds much better, much more philosophical, much more acceptable. Anyway, I'm told by my socialist worker friend that come the revolution there'll be champagne enough for everybody, not just the toffs. Mm. 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 That is... I'm hardly Nigella, but that is a very sensual experience. Cheers. That's just reminded me of, in Germany on New Year's Eve, the favourite midnight viewing on the TV for years has been, believe it or not, an English sitcom from about the 1960s, I think. I can't remember who the actors are, but it's set in an English stately home, and the splendid dining hall with the chandeliers and candelabras is set for 6 or 8 guests, and the butler, I'll call him George for this purposes, is run off his feet preparing for the usual guests, but this New Year's Eve, Milady's at the head of the table, and there are no guests. There are no other guests around the table because they've all popped their clogs, and she's getting on a bit. So George, the butler, says, "Shall I serve the usual, milady?" So he serves the soup, but on the way round, he has a neck of whatever wine is out, just like that. And then the next course, he takes the empty plates away, and then he says, "Shall I serve the next course, milady?" And on the way round the table, he trips over the tiger rug, and he has another sip of whatever wine's out, and he gets gradually more tipsy. And then it gets to the end of the meal, and she says, "Thank you, George, for that. The usual." And he nods, and they go upstairs together, which is, for the German audience, absolutely hilarious. So we can choose to be, or by inclination we are, either paranoid, everything's against us, or pronoic, everything works as exactly as it is meant to do. I'm going to have to edit this bit because I think the champagne, the English champagne, the Camzetta, is going straight to my head this lunchtime. It begs the question: why are there grounds for believing in all our comings and goings, our doings of life, that there is some good to be found in every situation, even the bad situations? Well, I suppose it comes down to our experience, our sort of interactive experience of life, but also our interactive experience of the presence of what you might call the divine. Are we just meaningless matter, which now I understand really we're talking about energy, crystallized, distilled energy. So it's just a meaningless concatenation of atoms or quanta flying about, or is there some commonality we share with some let's be provocative and say cosmic consciousness? I quite like that idea. That doesn't sort of offend anybody. The quantum physicists, the standard model physicists, I understand now, would acknowledge that consciousness is prior to matter. In the old materialistic way of thinking, that is what you and I learnt at school, and what is fed to us through every media channel, both in schools, university, social media, documentaries. There was a great documentary on Netflix the other day on the cheers on the missing bits, the missing particle begins with N. Neutrinos, that's the stuff. 95% of the mass of the universe has gone AWOL. It's missing, and right now there are billions and billions of neutrinos bombarding and going through your body and through this very splendid English sparkling wine, Camzetta sparkling wine. I hope he's going to sponsor me after this. But most physicists would acknowledge that consciousness or mind, the cosmic mind, must be prior to matter. Before, we were taught that mind, or even consciousness, is what they refer to as an emergent quality in the complexity of the brain. So if you get enough neurons and electrical synapses all pulsing at the same time, like some fantastic multidimensional disco perhaps, due to emergence, it goes ping and consciousness arises. Well, you and I, we know that that's unbelievable, frankly. How does the non-matter of mind, which is for both of us undeniable, spring out of matter? Maybe the matter is pinging around in sort of a quantum flux vibration at such a million cycles per second rate, which blood cells do actually. They vibrate at 1 million times a second, according to Carlo Rovelli. It seems simply unbelievable that inert matter can magically give rise to mind or consciousness. Well, that's how I take it anyway, but what do I know? This cosmic background mind, some of us might call God. Who knows what or who God is? It seems to me there are two ways of knowing God, or conducting your own research into who or what God is. The first, which seems to be adopted by the majority of religious people, one might say is derived. In other words, from what you are told, what you read through scriptures, sacred or otherwise, what you learn from whichever peer group or religious group you may happen to have grown up with. But I regard this as second-hand. You can respect the tradition, you can understand the dogma, but in the same way that the finger pointing at the moon is not the experience of the moon, in the same way, with spiritual matters, being told about the goodness of God, for example, or spirit, is a different thing than experiencing God or spirit. There's a very interesting, very provocative short little verse in one of Paul's letters. He says, "For we have the mind of Christ." Well, any Christian who takes their scripture seriously should be seriously excited, or at least intrigued by what on earth does it mean to have the mind of Christ. Really? Well, of course we're not talking about brain neurons, are we? We're talking about the nature of the mind of Christ. Very mystical. So instead of being dogmatic, be mystical. In other words, what is a modern mystic? Well, a modern mystic dives into the mystery of the experience of God first hand, not second hand, not chewing somebody else's cud or oysters. Find out for yourself, and as they say, as Meister Eckhart, my favourite 15th century German mystic, says, there is nothing so close to God as silence. Cheers.